One people, one nation, one America. This was President Biden's summation of the path forward as he marked 100 days in office and his first address to a joint session of Congress. The president showcased a big plan, big spending, and the virtues of big government with the hope of a big result while trying to excite Democrats and woo Republicans toward the middle in hopes that America will reap the spoils. Welcome to the Huddle. I'm Brendan Kownacki, and we don't want to waste any time this week. The first 100 days is a big marker for any administration, and the speech that Joe Biden gave to Congress and the American people last night showed a man with no intention of sitting on his hands while he holds the office. As always, we've got my colleague Marc Ross with us, and we've called in some reinforcements to discuss the president's speech and his agenda. He was a two-term congressman from the state of Pennsylvania and later appointed by President Obama to be the 32nd Undersecretary of the Army. Patrick Murphy, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Brandon and Mark. Thanks so much. And what a great day to be an American.
It really is. I thought a lot of this speech was very uplifting. I just want to throw it to you and say, what were your top line thoughts on the address from the president? And did this remind you of your days being in the chamber, attending States of the Union?
It did remind me of being in the chamber when I was in Congress, even after Congress, because I still have privileges to be on the floor of the House of Representatives. So I'm back with my former colleagues. But I'll tell you what, Brandon, Mark, it was definitely an ambitious speech last night, very positive, very much pro-America, very much, hey, we got to get the ball rolling. And in the first 100 days, which is this week, 100 days in his presidency, he was very clear in the campaign and throughout his first 100 days, COVID, COVID, COVID. And you're seeing the fruits of that labor now. You're seeing that over 40% of Americans are already vaccinated or have one shot of the vaccination. You see the economy growing. Just this week announced, the economy grew 4.6%. We have the lowest unemployment since COVID started. So it's not just keeping our family safe with COVID, and obviously, the massive manufacturing Herculean efforts that happen, but keeping people focused. You're seeing now, even cities that had high rates like New York City, Mayor de Blasio came out and said, by July 1st, everything's open. You're seeing fans back at sporting events. Why? Because we took the preventive measures necessary to wear a mask and also, obviously, to maintain social distancing. We're not going to be completely out of the woods, so I don't want to make it sound like that. But we are now in such much more phenomenal shape to get the economy, which is already starting to roar back, really to put it in a high gear and making sure that we build back better.
I liked that the president said he was trying to offer a dose of hope, which I thought was both great wordplay and really the attitude we need to take. One of the things he mentioned was that this was one of the greatest logistical achievements to try to roll out this vaccine to, as he said, over 200 million Americans have now gotten their first dose. As a military person, you know a lot about logistics and about the idea of mobilizing great amounts of people to do a big plan. Touch on that a little bit what you've seen and what the president described last night about this rollout for COVID recovery.
Well, it was clearly a public-private partnership and initiative. So the top levels of government, including the largest federal agency, which is the Department of Defense, it was four-star General Gus Perna. I worked with him. He's my colleague in the Pentagon, and doing a phenomenal job in coordination with HHS, the CDC, et cetera. And more importantly, with the private sector, you had competitors like the largest pharmaceutical company, Merck, and then Johnson & Johnson, basically where they usually compete, they're hand in glove, doubling their manufacturing capacity, because even though Merck didn't have, one of the COVID vaccinations, they partnered with J&J to increase that vaccination. You have companies like LabCorp, led by Adam Schechter, who, is making sure that people go in there for the testing to make sure that if you have it or not, or if you have, obviously, the remnants of it. And so the antibodies. So you saw a great public-private partnership that led us to this spot. We are, again, not out of the woods yet, but we are in much, much better shape going into the summer months but more importantly, putting things in place so we don't fall back. Letting people know, one, it is so critically important to get vaccinated. And it's not just the government's job. This is not a whole of government approach, Brandon and Mark. This is a whole of nation approach. We need the private sector and influencers in the private sector to also stand up and let folks know, whether they come from the right side of the Republican Party or the left side of the Democratic Party. No matter what color, creed, gender they are, we need to make sure we get people vaccinated so that we're all safer as a country. And we learn from the tragic things. And I will tell you really quick, I was proud to serve, you mentioned my bio. I was proud to serve in Congress. I was also proud to serve in our military. And I'm the distinguished chair of innovation up at West Point right now, but I served as an Army captain, was a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. People forget, when countries or our own country calls 911, it's the Pentagon that answers the phone. When we had the Ebola crisis, where we had tens of thousands of mostly Africans being killed, it was the world that asked our United States of America to respond. And it was America sending in the 101st Airborne Division in Africa to make sure we're doing everything necessary to keep lives safe. We saved tens of thousands of lives. Unfortunately, tens of thousands were killed before we got there. But, that type of approach was critically important. And that type of partnership and the lessons learned, we applied to, obviously, with COVID. But moving forward, we have to make sure that until we get, obviously, even greater vaccinations in our own country and across the world, we won't be completely out of the woods.
Hey, Patrick, I was wondering if you could just, step back a little bit too. You've had unique experiences, obviously being in the legislative branch and also being in the executive branch. How important are these speeches from a presidential standpoint to really kind of focus the whole government, even the nation? Obviously, 535 opinions on Capitol Hill, hundreds of agencies, different priorities at the cabinet level. Can you just talk about the jockeying and what the presidents do, why they make these kind of speeches to say, hey, this is what we should be focused on?
Mark, I appreciate that. It's critically important because, again, it's the whole of nation approach to get there in front of the nation in primetime television in everybody's home and to rally obviously the leaders in our government, a leadership that basically is 50-50 Democrat, Republican in both the House and the Senate. In the House, it's minuscule, about a 5-vote margin with the Democrats. It's 50-50 in the Senate. So I saw last night folks like Ted Cruz, as you know, not the most friendly to Democrats or President Biden, clap when President Biden talked about COVID and our response. Other folks like Jim Jordan clap when President Biden talked about how it's noble to serve as a police officer, as a safety officer in their communities. My dad served for 22 years. After serving in the Navy, he served as a Philadelphia police officer. That's something that, those of us in blue collar communities were very, very proud about. To have the president of the United States, the commander in chief, recognize them and have Republican leaders stand up to not just be partisan, to clap and hopefully will help, support our efforts. Because again, yes, I think things are turning around. The numbers suggest that they are. There's no doubt about it. The stock market, the economy growth, 4.6%. But there's a lot more work that we need to do to build it back better. So when we talk about infrastructure, I'm sure we'll get there in this conversation. Other things, we need to make sure it's bipartisan, and that's what President Biden's trying to do.
I thought the president used a lot of really action-oriented wording. He was talking about upgrading and modernizing part of that Build Back Better plan and the infrastructure plan. He was mentioning how, there have been more jobs created in the first 100 days of his administration than any other president on record. And that even when it comes to big issues like climate change, that this is going to center around jobs, that everything is a little bit more woven together than we've sometimes given it credit for. He mentioned the blue collar blueprint, that a lot of these jobs that are going to be created are 90%, he said, in the American Jobs Plan would not require a college degree. Talk a little bit more about that almost grassroots approach that he's taking. Joe Biden's always wanted to be the folksy president, the guy from Pittsburgh.
Well, that Pittsburgh, this is like the Jets of the Sharks. That's the other side of the state. We're talking, I'm from the East. We're from Philadelphia. I went to college. I got my Army commission to Army ROTC from the University of Scranton.
This is the whole sheets. Wow.
Third senator So they're fighting wars, brother. I know we're in the huddle. We're the same team here, Democrats, Republicans on this, but more importantly, to your point, you're right. He wants to be plain spoken. He wants to talk to everyday families. He's not just talking to Wall Street. He's not, and again, he talks to them through policies. He's talking to everyday families. And that's why he did this primetime national speech, which was critically important. When you hear him and you hear him talking about Build Back Better, when you hear him talk about infrastructure, I get it. Infrastructure for most folks, aren't sexy, roads, bridges, but that is the foundation, the very foundation of our economy. We need to understand we are competing with China. We are competing. And again, China is 4 times our size in population. China, isn't a near peer competitor. They are a competitor, both with their economy and their military. So understanding that, we need to make sure that we are as competitive as possible. And that's making sure that we have a true, strong foundation, bridges, roads, airports. When you look at the internet, to making sure that we have the digital infrastructure in the digital economy. And there's a lot more work that we need to do. And also, when you talk about cyber and some other things we need to be doing to keep our family, our businesses, our intellectual property safe against those who want to do us harm and have done us harm.
This could be a whole sidebar of the Sheets versus Wawa debate, but we'll save that for a different huddle. And as we've talked about, my quick notes going through the speech last night, I think Biden used the word jobs 43 times. And we've talked about this before, how there's this interplay between foreign policy, domestic policy. Even, Boris Johnson in Westminster and London is using the term Build Back Better. Patrick, can you talk about the interplay? I mean, you mentioned China, obviously, but, this idea that, obviously we need to build the country for the domestic, but it's also the foreign policy, international aspects of the Build Back Better plan.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, we have to build back better, and we do it in a smart and effective way. President Biden's laying out a very ambitious way to do it, but that comes with funding, and the price tag with infrastructure, just in America, is $2 trillion. So the Republicans obviously have a pretty big say on that, and other, conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and some others in the Senate. So when you look at that, you're going to see, what the Republicans, I will give them credit, have put forward a plan and spending of their own. And, theirs is about, $800 billion. And again, when we say $2 trillion, just so we're level set here, it's over 10 years, right? So if it's $2 trillion, that's $200 billion a year. The Republicans' plan is $800 billion. Okay, so what is that? That's $80 billion a year, right? So again, they're going to work back and forth with numbers. Congress controls the power, has the power of the purse. You all know I used to teach constitutional law at West Point. I love the Constitution. I could talk about, the 3 branches of government ad nauseum, about, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and judicial branch. It's like rocks, paper, scissors. One's not more powerful than the other. But I will tell you, the Congress, again, the most important when it comes to the budget, because they're the only ones that can appropriate the money. The president's putting out his budget. He's already put the DOD budget out, and he's going to be putting out the other branches of government here in May coming up, and it's an exciting time for all Americans.
Patrick, can you put on your political strategist hat? Because the number is staggering. I mean, today, Karl Rove was out with a column in the Journal calling Biden the $6 trillion man. These numbers are staggering. I mean, basically, this is 1.5 times bigger than the Japanese economy. This is almost twice the size of the German economy. I mean, these numbers are absolutely staggering. Is it necessary? I mean, just from a political strategy standpoint, it was interesting you mentioned the rollout. This is over 10 years. Can you just talk about the communications aspect around this? How Biden's going to have to talk about this just to get away from these scary looking numbers.
I was thinking about Lee Sanders being Lee Majors being the $6 million man back in the day in the 70s when I was a young cat in my row house in Northeast Philadelphia watching television. But I think he's a Dave Farrell Fawcett. So for all your younger viewers, they have no idea what we're talking about right now. But Google. I will tell you this. There is no doubt that people want the economy to move in the right direction. I do think that most Americans, they are sick of politicians. They are sick of the political gamesmanship, that people who have now come to Jesus on national debt deficits, which I have always been a conservative Democrat. I actually carry on my phone the U.S. debt clock, and that every American owns $85,000 toward debt, that we pay interest on that debt. Some of that debt is owed by China and Japan and other countries. But they are coming to Jesus now after passing the largest tax cuts for the wealthiest 1% of Americans that was not paid for. That basically will add, and they were permanent. So what Joe Biden is doing, when he puts forward an infrastructure plan, which he has, it is paid for. It is paid for in a very specific way. It's saying that folks that, capital gains tax, it's going to affect that 0.005% of Americans. It's those who make over $1 million a year. So again, that's the president's budget. Congress has a vote on this. And again, that's what you're going to see, the grappling back and forth. But I think there's no doubt that there's a lot of Americans that do want to see a sense of urgency of Democrats, Republicans coming together to put the country first, and to stop the brinksmanship, to stop the bickering. We understand that sometimes you have to spend money to make money. They have to spend money to invest in infrastructure. And again, when we talk about things like, green energy jobs and some other things, because, it might be broken into, these are jobs that are now. These are jobs that, when you look at places where I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, we had the largest landfill in America. That's fine. We took people's trash from all over. We put mounds of it, right? But we also had the second largest green panels, in the country, acres and acres. We also have like a Green Jobs Academy. We have folks that were manufacturing wind turbines. And again, these are things this is technology that are happening right now. When you look at infrastructure, and again, when I say infrastructure, it's not just the roads and bridges that people think about, which it is, but it's also about the digital infrastructure. It's also about, jobs of today that will still be there tomorrow. I think that's critically important as we move forward to make sure that the Congress and the president are focused like a bulldog on a bone. We have been that way when it came to COVID. Now let's get that way and act with a sense of urgency when it comes to infrastructure.
On this program, we've talked a little bit about that bulldog sense that we get from Joe Biden, that some people think maybe he's being so, forceful with his action because he doesn't plan on pursuing a second term. But, there's also the idea that he was softly wooing Republicans last night. At one point, he even said about immigration, let's argue over it, let's debate it, let's act. I thought that it's that idea that you can be tough, but still acknowledge the differences of your opponent.
No doubt. And I think, listen, and I joked with you, Brandon, because you talked about Pittsburgh, versus Scranton. And President Biden, in your defense, I spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh and he announced his campaign in Pittsburgh and all that, right? But I will say, I think that's what you're seeing right now. President Biden wants to work with the Congress. He wants to work with Republicans. He has done this charm offensive where he's bringing Republican members into the Oval Office, that some of them who have never been there before under the last president, and just saying, hey, let's work together. He gives some cookies on the way out and things of that nature. And again, that doesn't necessarily get votes, but it does set the tone that he wants to work with them. He wants to debate. He wants to make sure that our government starts working together again. And they haven't. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Donald Trump, in his 40s, and again, I'm not here to talk about yesterday, but he passed a tax break. And it was mostly 90% for the wealthiest 1% of Americans, and it helped that 1%. But what Joe Biden said is we have to help all Americans. He's not trying to stick it to anybody. He's like, we want the fair share. And by the way, if you're when we talk about capital tax gains, he said, I just want you to pay what every other Americans are paying based on their taxes. You should get a special tax break. And so when you see that and you look at that, I'm hopeful that there's Republicans, especially new generation Republicans, that want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem and the gridlock that we've seen for far too long out of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and think about the Joe Biden style. I've been thinking about this. I've been following presidential politics since Reagan came to my little hometown in Northwest Ohio in '84. And short of Reagan, I've never seen somebody more relaxed, more comfortable with the job. Before we came on camera, Brendan and I were talking about maybe the COVID has maybe helped Joe Biden in the sense everything's more intimate, only having a few hundred people there last night in the chamber. He's such a good retail politician, and he generally seems to care. He is truly, it's the most American story we've had in a long time of any kind of president. And I think it's all coming through. And he's basically saying, I've thought this for a long time. I now have the opportunity. I'm going to go big. make a difference. What's your sense about Joe Biden, who's mentioned, the cookies, bringing people in, just from the retail politician aspect of him?
Listen, we call him our Pennsylvania's third senator for years, even though he represented technically Delaware, because he's one of us and he gets it. And I was proud to stand with him just days before Election Day across America in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Bristol at Bucks County Community College. That gave me my start when I was age 17 as a full-time student. And I was able to, join the Army and go to college and eventually go to law school. And I think that's astute, Mark, what you're saying, because he doesn't have to rush around to event. It's a slower pace. And he's a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more deliberate, and definitely more relaxed. And, that's his setting, is being around people that he's worked with and that he's willing to work with. And folks that are new to the game, or I shouldn't say game, new to the profession. Because, listen, there's 600,000 elected positions in America, but it's the 535, the 435 in the House, another 100 in the Senate that are critically important, and he has to work with them to get the ball moving. He can't do this by himself. So I think he recognizes it. He sees it. If they're not willing to work with him, he's going to do what he can. He's been pushing, as $15, minimum wage. I think it's a long time. We haven't passed since I was in Congress, since back in 2007. That's 14 years ago. That's not good. And that's $7.25. That's unacceptable. So he tried to work with it. He tried to include it in the last bill. They said no, and so he took it out. He still wants to do it, but in the meantime, he's like, listen, it's been 100 days. I'm not going to wait forever. So now everyone in federal government, we have a $15 minimum wage, and every company in the private sector that does business with the federal government also has to do $15 minimum wage for their employees. So, he's sending a message that he's serious. He wants to work with the Congress. He wants to work with the Republicans. If they don't act, he's going to act. And whether it's about the $15 minimum wage, whether it's about the ghost guns when we talk about, the mass shootings that we've had. And again, I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed carry permit. I believe in the Second Amendment. That Second Amendment does not give you the right to have ghost guns. That Second Amendment doesn't give you the right to have weapons of war concealed out and about in our communities and our churches. Just like, I have a driver's license. I drive a Jeep, right? I can't drive a tank, even though I joined in the Army. I was in tanks before down the street. Why? Because I don't have a license for something like that. If you want a license to have a weapons of war, you have to have higher standards. And that's what the common sense stuff that Joe Biden's trying to do. Whether Republicans are willing to work with him or not, we'll see. Those are pretty, I would say, religious issues to a lot of folks. Any type of common sense, reasonable waiting periods, et cetera, are usually pushed back pretty hard. But I don't think we should stand by when we have these mass shootings all across America and in our churches, in our synagogues. One happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh a few years ago. But we've had more mass shootings in the last year than we've ever had in American history. And we better wake up and see what's going on and try and do something about it.
I like that the president actually said, we're not trying to change the Constitution about guns. We're just being reasonable. But that same level of accountability, you mentioned, he really brought it to a lot of issues, telling Congress they need to act on the minimum wage, voting rights, immigration, protections for women, protections for different races and LGBTQ communities. He said that we need to lower prescription drug costs and keep pushing forward with tax credits for children and things like that. Do you think that this president, more than others, wants to hold the other sides of government accountable? He mentioned even the Buy American directive, which he's pushing towards the cabinet members and saying that this is how we're going to revitalize our own economy, is by investing in it, by creating jobs, by buying our own products.
Yeah, no doubt, Brett. I appreciate it. And that's why I was so excited to join the Huddle, because it is, at that point when you're talking about common sense things, like, I was so blessed to go from community college to become a West Point professor, 10 years later. I didn't go to West Point, I taught there and I teach there now, but, it's a special place. It's the premier leadership institution in the world. But I'm teaching constitutional law at West Point. teaching the next generation of military leaders about that oath that they take to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when I gave them that course, when I was there with them every day in what's called Thayer Hall, teaching them, knowing about their backstories, knowing why they joined the military, well, that's when our nation was attacked. And I deployed to combat twice. I was part of the invasion force in Iraq. I lost 19 of my brothers in Iraq. I never made it home with the 82nd Airborne Division. There we were fighting for people in Iraq in places like Baghdad in 138-degree heat that the rate to go vote and show their purple fingers when they made that vote, that their voices were held accountable in their country for the first time in a long time. To see that, though, get chipped away here at home is disgraceful. If you can't play by the rules of the game, if you can't get enough votes on your policies, look at your policies. Don't try and cheat the system and not allow people to vote. I mean, come on. No one is for, I want to make sure, if you try to commit voter fraud, you should go to jail, period. End of discussion. No one questions that. But you shouldn't make people wait hours and hours and hours to exercise their right to vote. That's disgraceful, but it goes on. It's going to go on a couple of weeks here in a primary vote in Pennsylvania. It went on in Georgia. It goes on all over this country. And that's a disgrace. And the reality of it is that those lines are Democratic areas. That's how it is. And you know what? Shame on folks who stand in the way of supporting our Constitution, of supporting their fellow Americans from exercising their right to vote.
It's interesting about the Constitution. I mean, how it's so, I don't know, sense like Joe Biden being an institutionalist, spending so much time in Capitol Hill. He actually opened his speech last night and he said, "It's nice to be back here." I didn't know. I read it like he was saying, it's great to be back in this legislative body. People don't understand how our government works. There's been some kind of disconnect, and the need to get back to how government works, civic education, it's super important. I'm hoping that there's a rejuvenation because there's been so much friction. There's so much hyper politics. I don't know. Am I being too optimistic? Am I being, do you feel, I mean, you're out there talking to voters. Do you feel that there is a renewed sense that, hey, this is a special republic. What we have here, this government is special. Let's cherish it. Let's protect it.
I do. I do think there has just been. I think we hit the low end a few years ago. I'm not going to lie to you, right? And what you saw going on, and I'm not just talking about policies like locking up kids in cages and stuff like that under the last administration. I'm talking about the lack of accountability. People who say one thing and do another, holding the highest political positions in the land. I do think there is a new generation of leaders stepping forward that, frankly, look like America. Finally, a new generations of leaders that are saying on both sides of the party are saying, I came here to get things done. And I'm going to have the political courage, like John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and John McCain have shown in decades past, that they are going to put the country first over their political parties. They're going to do what they can to move the ball forward. I think Joe Biden was talking to those folks that he's hosted in the Oval Office, those folks that were in the audience last night and saying, come on, man. Let's come together. Let's debate these issues. We're not going to agree on everything, but we could agree on enough, 80% of which, to move the ball forward to start changing things for the better for all Americans, and not just the wealthiest 1%, not just those who have a dog in the fight, but everyone. I think you're seeing those things, and obviously, clearly, the issues we've already talked about when it was infrastructure and our competitor like China that's trying to do us harm.
One of my favorite lines last night was when the president said, "We the people, it's us." He wanted to remind members of Congress that we're not talking at Americans, that everything that they vote on is for their own benefit as well. And going back to what you were talking about with your military service, as we come to a close here, I do want to touch on that. You mentioned about your deployment to Iraq. You were the first Iraq War veteran elected to Congress. And now, as we're withdrawing from Afghanistan, and that 2 decades of conflict is coming to a close, talk to us a little bit about the just impact. You better than many people know people who have served over there in these last 20 years. You yourself have been involved in that conflict in your time in the Pentagon. What is it like now? And is this a positive, negative? Is it to be determined on whether this withdrawal will be a successful next step?
Yeah, well, let's just, as I told you earlier, I was there on active duty, teaching at West Point when our nation was attacked, and thousands of innocent Americans, civilians, were murdered on that day. And we brought justice to them, to Al Qaeda, where they're based out of in Afghanistan. Frankly, when we were first in Afghanistan, we didn't have enough troops to smoke out bin Laden. We got diverted to Iraq, where we had over 100,000 in troops. And then when President Obama came in, people don't give him credit, but President Obama came in and said, hey, we're bringing the troops home from Iraq. We're going to refocus on what got us in this to begin with. And that was bin Laden. And he's out there. We haven't got him. We haven't brought him to justice yet. We tripled the amount of folks, of our troops in Afghanistan. We smoked him out. We brought him to justice. We then started bringing the troops home in Afghanistan. And now, obviously, there's a few thousand that are in there now, less than 5,000 in Afghanistan. President Biden was very clear. We do not want to have forever wars. It's been 20 years that we've been in Afghanistan. It's been roughly 17, 18 years that we've been in Iraq. And so he has been clear that it demands a political solution. We can't do it themselves. We have made great gains there that women are now girls are able to go to school. Women are allowed to vote now in Afghanistan. But it's up to the Afghan people to stand up and to lead their country. We can't be bogged down in the middle, of daily terrorist attacks and mortar attacks that are going on in places like Kabul, Afghanistan, and other places. And so, I've been there. I've been in that region when I was leading the Army, and I think it's sending a message through obviously Tony Blinken and the State Department why we need to make sure that political solution is sustainable, and that we are not going to allow, even when we bring our troops home, we are not going to allow them to harbor terrorists again that want to do us harm. That we will smoke them out again. We will bring them to justice before they have an opportunity to harm our families like they did 20 years ago.
Patrick, one last question. It was really powerful. It was a great reminder. I can't imagine being at West Point on 9/11. I mean, it's still a day, obviously, I think about a lot. For me, I was living, half a mile from the Pentagon, and seeing that smoking was quite surreal. Finishing up, can you talk about, looks like Joe Biden's going to make his first trip to England as part of the G7, maybe a stop in Europe. Obviously, a lot of talk about the Indo-Pacific, where that is on the map is super interesting. China, Taiwan. Can you just talk to our viewers about, just from a foreign policy perspective, from a macro perspective, what we should be thinking about, what's on your radar, what books we should be reading, stuff like that?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I just did an event with the 4-star General Mike Murray from the Army Futures Command down in Austin, Texas, and the Chief of Staff of the British Army. When you look at his name's General Carlton Smith, and we have a true partnership because we share values. We believe in strong national security, and again, when you talk about folks like myself in the warrior class, when we talk about being 20 years in Afghanistan, almost 18 years in Iraq, we've asked less than 1% of America to serve. Time and time again, it's actually about 0.4% of America. And so, folks like my family, where, I served 2 deployments, my brother served 2 deployments, my 2 uncles served in Vietnam, my dad served during Vietnam. Again, we've asked the warrior class of America to serve. About 78% of our current folks on active service in our military come from military families. But I would say to you, we need to have allies outside of our border. We need to have allies like, obviously, the UK. We need to have allies like India. And again, when you say India, the coronavirus they are overrun with coronavirus right now. They didn't do the proper procedures of shutting things down. Their hospitals, their hotels are turned into hospitals. Their train cars are turned into hospitals. It's not going well in India. So what's the United States of America doing? We're sending more vaccine supply to India. That's a positive thing. But when you have allies like India, when you have allies, frankly, like Japan, South Korea, Australia. That's important because what China has been doing this last decade, China has been out there with their Belt and Road Initiative, where they're basically trying to buy friends in places like Africa, which has over 1 billion people. They've out there, and again, it's very transactional from their perspective. We're not transactional as America. We have interests. We have absolute national security interests. We have economic interests, but we don't try to get people's land. We don't try to force them in anything. But we understand that China sees us as an inferior class. They see us as someone, they don't want a win-win situation. They want a win-lose situation. They want to win. They want us to lose. And so when we understand that we have a peer competitor out there who are stealing our intellectual property rights when it comes to cybersecurity, who are being more aggressive, and they have allies like Iran and others that are doing things, and they've been very aggressive in the Pacific region when you talk about the South China Sea. So when you see that and how that relates to everyday Americans, that's why it's important when President Biden lets people know, like, hey, this isn't about Democrat, Republican, ladies and gentlemen. This is about the United States of America against folks who want to do your families harm. So it's cut the BS here in Washington. It's good to be back here, but we got a lot of work to do. Let's move the ball forward. Let's build back America, because we have more competitors out in the field of battle here that we got to, and again, I'm not just talking about military battle, I'm talking about the economic battle that we have to address and compete against every single day.
As the president ended last night, nothing is beyond our capacity. Thank you so much, Patrick Murphy, for joining us. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your analysis here with us today on The Huddle.
Thanks, gentlemen. And if you or anyone else needs to reach me in my social media, I'm at Patrick Murphy PA on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. I appreciate what you all do. Appreciate the perspective you all bring. And if I can be helpful, let me know.
Mark, that was a wonderful discussion. I love when we can draw on somebody who's actually been in the room for this kind of experience, an address to Congress.
I mean, what experience? I mean, as he talks about Bucks County Community College, teaching at West Point. I mean, what a resume. Actually been a member of Congress, actually worked in the Pentagon at the highest level, and served our country with distinction in the field. Unbelievable. Great to have Patrick Murphy inside the Huddle.
Yeah, he's a guy who I would pick in my huddle every week, every time. But since we already had him, Mark, who do you want in your huddle this week?
I'm going the Super League. I loved it. Send the hate mail, tweet at me, whatever. I love the idea. Super League, Super League, Super League. Brings together all my fantasies, soccer, globalization, politics, big money, ego, Europe. I mean, love it. Everything about it. Why should I have to suffer watching DC United play FC Dallas when I can see Man U play Juventus? I love it. I'm sorry to see the dream is not dead. It's still alive. I predict the Super League will be back in 2 years' time. Bigger, better than ever. Also, before I go out this rant, has a league ever gotten more earned media than the Super League? I say no. And the knowledge of this league is internationally known. It can't be stopped. It's a force for good. Get on board the Super League.
It was only around for 3 days, and they
exactly. Really... Think about the amount of earned media. I even got people I know that I know nothing about soccer, tweeting me about this, asking me about this. I mean, the knowledge of the name ID around the Super League is off the charts. All right, Brendan, it's gonna be hard for you to beat the Super League, as we both know. It is super. So, who do you want in your huddle this week?
Well, Mark, this week I am picking Paddington Bear, the small British stuffed animal. This week, the website Rotten Tomatoes unearthed an old review of the movie Citizen Kane, knocking it off the top roost as the highest rated movie of all time. And that leaves in second place, jumping to the top of the list, Paddington 2, which I had no idea, even though it's a fun and uplifting story. We both love London, but who knew that Paddington had what it takes to sit atop as film royalty? Well, after that disastrous Oscars, I'll take Paddington anytime.
Low blow, Oscars. Oh my God. Did anybody see it? That was a great pick. I have no idea about any of those things. Citizen Kane, can't believe it's not number one, but sure. Paddington Bear, sounds great.
All right, Mark. Well, this is great. We covered a lot of ground this week. Joe go big Biden, and we went big this week. We'll pick it up next week here on The Huddle.